All right, let's talk about one of the biggest puzzles in rock and roll history, the Replacements. Here's a band from Minneapolis that had it all. The songs, the talent, the pure heart, everything you need to be absolutely massive. But they just never quite made it. So how in the world did a band so hell-bent on crashing and burning manage to forge a legacy that literally changed music forever?
You hear this phrase all the time when people talk about them. And it's not an insult, not at all. It's really more of a badge of honor. It just perfectly nails the huge contradiction at the heart of their career. This incredible story of staggering potential that was always met with these equally glorious and, yeah, often deliberate flameouts.
And this right here is the fundamental tug-of-war that defined them. Think about it. In one corner, you've got the absolute soul of the band, Paul Westerberg's songwriting. I mean, the guy could just rip your heart out with how honest his songs were. But then, in the other corner, you've got this almost pathological need to blow up every single chance they got. Their entire career was just a constant battle between those two sides. So that brings us to the real question, right? How did this walking, talking contradiction of a band that flat out refused to play the game, end up writing the rule book for entire genres of music that came later? That's the story we're going to unpack right now.
Okay, so let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to where this thing started. Picture this, a cramped basement in South Minneapolis, late 70s. This is the primordial ooze, where that beautiful, chaotic noise of the Replacements first took shape. They went from just making a neighborhood ruckus to becoming indie rock royalty.
So here's the classic lineup. You got the founder, Bob Stinson, a totally erratic guitar genius. You got Chris Mars on the drums. Then there's Paul Westerberg, the frontman. He was actually a janitor who heard them practicing and ended up becoming their main songwriter. And then, get this, they needed a bass player, so they recruit Bob's little brother, Tommy Stinson. He was 12. I'm not kidding, 12 years old. That fact alone should tell you everything you need to know, right? This was never ever going to be a normal band.
And the speed of their evolution on their indie label, Twin/Tone, it was breathtaking. I mean, they just explode onto the scene as this pure, beer-soaked punk band. That was their debut. But then, just 2 years later, they drop Hootenanny, and it's like they threw the rulebook out the window. They're mixing in country, blues, pure noise, whatever they wanted. And then, just 1 year after that, they deliver Let It Be, an album that would basically become a sacred text for American alternative rock.
And this right here just perfectly captures their whole vibe. So the story goes, they're recording the album Hootenanny, and just to mess with their producer, they decide to swap instruments for the title track. So you have Westerberg on drums, the drummer on guitar, just complete and total chaos. But see, this wasn't just some dumb gimmick, it was a mission statement. It was them declaring war on professionalism, a pure expression of their punk rock soul.
But then, out of all that chaos, came this. Their 1984 album, Let It Be, was just a massive artistic leap forward. I mean, a quantum leap. All of a sudden, the bratty punks were writing these incredibly sincere, vulnerable songs. You had Androgynous, this tender piano ballad about gender fluidity that was so far ahead of its time. And then you had Unsatisfied, a raw, screaming anthem of just pure angst that would go on to define a generation.
Well, the success of Let It Be gets them noticed. They get signed to a major label, Sire Records. This was it. This was their shot at the big time, their chance to become actual stars. But instead of playing the game, they basically decided to set the whole stadium on fire. This period, right here, is where the legend of their self-destruction was truly forged.
Okay, so this is the moment. January 18th, 1986, they get booked on Saturday Night Live. Now, you gotta understand, this was the platform. This could launch a band into the stratosphere. We're talking millions of people watching live, the entire industry paying attention. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, pretty much everything. They stumble onto one of the biggest stages in television, and they're clearly wasted. They give this totally shambolic performance, where Paul Westerberg audibly drops an F-bomb on live TV, which in 1986 was a huge deal. The chaos apparently continued backstage, and the result was swift, a lifetime ban from the show. Just like that. Their reputation as unmanageable troublemakers, cemented forever.
And this defiance, it wasn't just for live TV. When MTV and their label came calling wanting a music video for their anthem, Bastards of Young, the band delivered, well, this. A single, static shot of a speaker playing the song. And then, at the end, someone just kicks it in. That's it.
They were actively rejecting the very tools of stardom because they saw the whole thing as totally inauthentic.
So you might think all of this self-destructive behavior was just, well, destructive. But it actually created something really powerful, the archetype of the lovable loser. Think about it. They were brilliant, but they were messy. They were so talented, but just allergic to playing the game. It all came from this deep-seated punk rock fear that success meant selling out. And if you were a kid in the 80s feeling totally out of place with all those polished pop stars on TV, this was your band. They were for anyone who ever felt like they just didn't fit in.
But, all that self-destruction had real-world consequences. That very same year, the founding guitarist Bob Stinson, the guy whose chaotic energy really defined their whole early sound, was fired from the band. His substance abuse, combined with his inability to adapt to Westerberg's more mature songwriting, it created a fracture that the band honestly never truly recovered from. It was really the end of their wildest, most volatile era.
And that brings us to their final years, and the enduring echo of their music. I mean, the band would eventually just fall apart, but their sound, and even more so, their story, that would reverberate for decades to come, shaping the very music that would go on to find the massive success they always seemed to run away from.
Even their ending was just as perfectly chaotic as their career. Their final show, July 4th, 1991, in Chicago. What happens? The band members just start walking off stage, one by one, and hand their instruments to their road crew. The roadies literally finish the show for them. It was public, it was darkly funny, and it was just the most replacements way imaginable to call it quits.
So, by all the normal commercial metrics, they failed, right? Well, not exactly. That number you see right there, 3. That's for the 3 decades of music that were shaped by this band that never really had a hit. See, their true success wasn't ever going to be measured in gold records. It was measured in the musical DNA they injected into the future of rock and roll.
And look, here's the hard evidence. This is a proof of their legacy. You just don't get the raw emotional angst of grunge bands like Nirvana without the blueprint the replacements laid down, that mix of punk energy and exposed nerve vulnerability. You don't get the confessional, intricate guitar stuff of Midwest emo without their influence. And you sure as hell don't get the entire all-country scene with bands like Wilco without their early experiments in American roots music. They may not have sold millions of records, but you can bet the bands they inspired certainly did.
Ultimately, the greatest thing the replacements ever created wasn't a hit single. It was their story. They proved that a narrative of glorious, beautiful failure can actually echo louder and longer than a simple success story. And it really makes you wonder, maybe, just maybe, it's more powerful to burn out than it is to just fade away.